Good afternoon, friends. Gord's Poetry Show, number 61. Just before the final winking out of 2018 and the, brave dawn of 2019. But let's not bother with all that historical stuff because poetry is eternal and is not dependent on outside forces. It is its own universe, its own language, and its own neurology, if you like. The endless conversation between poets of long ago and poets of now. And maybe one day poets of the future. On poetry. The flame of a man's imagination should be organic with his body, coincident with an act, like an igniting spark. But mostly he fails in the act and expels his bad humor in visions. A man curses, seeing the thing he hates in pain, cursed by his vision. This is poetry, action unrealized. What we want most, we imagine most, like self-abusing boys. Lately, of woman man has been deprived, the smaller man and the greater too. And in all the language of his verse, love, 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 he cries, never having enough. Formerly, it was different. Hairy and sensible, he needed food when he painted steak chops and bison meat in a gaping cave. A bird or juicy calves of mammoth, his midday meals. He carved these also on his spears and on the handles of knives, handing the art down the generations. But with the coming of civilization, his body desired other food at times, less personal but unattainable. So the poet who had vision wanted to be capable of commanding God like Jeremiah. But denied, he ranted poetry. The poet should have been a king. Shakespeare should have been all his monarchs ruling England. Homer should have been Achilles, frowning for Briseis, or fighting for his friend. These great ones imagined grandly the life of their body having defaulted. So in our time, the poet, in need of quiet, order in chaos, complete community, wants something he does not have in all nakedness. And so he wrestles with the maiden, his wild dream in his sleep. Guess who that was? Louis Dudek, the Montreal poet, the Canadian pioneer of poets publishing their own, and warmly reminisced by Lawrence Hutchman in the previous poetry show. And that is from a fine anthology called Canadian Poetry 1920 to 1960, edited by Brian Traherne. Lots of great poets in here, I mean, really. And I have a feeling I might get to an Elizabeth Brewster one in just a moment. Elizabeth Brewster, also in this anthology. I mean, there's loads of great stuff in here. We're talking, Raymond Nister, E.J. Pratt, Earl Burney, Charles Bruce, F.R. Scott, W.W.E. Ross, A.J.M. Smith, A.M. Klein. Lesser known people to me like Floris Clark McLaren, Bertram Warr, well-known names like Robert Finch, P.K. Page, Kenneth Leslie. Oh, it just goes on and on and on. John Glasgow, Miriam Waddington, Raymond Sowster. That's just, Roy Daniels, Douglas LePen, J. McPherson, Anne Wilkinson. All the great Canadian modernists are in here, in my opinion. As I was saying, Elizabeth Brewster, just a little quickie because we've got a lot to get to here today. Well, at least I think we've got a lot to get to. That last poem was from 1946, or that's when it was published. With the war and all, it might have been held up, might have been written in 42 for all we know. This one's from 1951. Elizabeth Brewster, poet and librarian and teacher. In the library. Believe me, I say to the gentleman with the pince-nez, framed forever with one hand in his pocket, with passion, with intensity, I say it. Believe me, oh believe me, you are not I, making my chair squeak on the chilly floor, catching up my pencil, I say, but of course I am myself. And all the while time flows, time flows, time flows. The minutes ripple over the varnished tables. This is June, I say, not yesterday or tomorrow. This is I, not Byron or Vanessa. I am not in the moon. I must differentiate my body from all other bodies, realizing the mole in my neck, the scar in my hand. I must wind my watch, say it is 10 o'clock. But I know I am not convinced, feel uneasily the lie. Because I am Byron, I am Vanessa. I am the pictured man with the frigid smile. I am the girl at the next table, raising vague eyes, flicking ash from her cigarettes, the thoughts from her mind. The elastic moment stretches to infinity. The elastic moment, the elastic point of space. The blessed sun becomes the blessed moon. Nice one, Elizabeth. A couple of poetry shows ago, we chatted with Steve Venright, that marvelous acrobat of language. And I'd like to, we did a lot of chattering there, chatting and babbering and, all that kind of stuff. And we didn't really get to not enough of his poems. So I'd like to read a couple more from the small but delightful volume, Strange Wonder. Great poems, marvelous artwork. What more could you ask for? I mean, really. When I say strange, S-T-R-A-U-N-G-E, strange wonder. My last incarnation lasted only a few hours. I was born cyclopean with both penis and vagina, a long tapir-esque snout and wings instead of arms. There were 2 legs, granted, but one to the fore and one to the aft. Also present was a majestic prehensile tail loping downward from the shoulder blades, which I'm sure could have been put to good use if not for the brevity of its animation. The midwife tried to hide me, more for her own protection than mine, I suspect, but to no avail. My mother, dead from horror at the sight of me, was little comfort to my father as he lay expiring in a bloody fashion from projectile wounds inflicted by his morally superior neighbours. Oh, sorry about that. It was a couple 100 years ago in the south of England, and births like the one I had committed were not yet commonplace. As for me, I outlived them all, my midwife having been fatally ravaged by Samaritans from the clergy. Rising on my nimble fleshy wings to empty my labyrinthine bowels upon the righteous throng below. Having eluded flying rocks and slashing scythes, I met my end, ironically, in a freak accident. A head-on collision with a rare diurnal bat of monstrous proportions. Was I immune to sonar? Snuffed the brief but glorious flame of my existence. If you go to a large metropolitan library housing an extensive collection of periodicals and microfilm, you can read for yourself the commendably unbiased account of my life in the Gentleman's Magazine, March 1739. Or you can take my word for it. I am a lawyer now, and as such, pledged to truth. In all things, see the good. Ah, yes. Thank you for not chasing your tail. The birds were clanging in the trees. They tasted much like the motor of an overworked electric fan doused with absinthe. For once, eating the air seemed less a fanciful symbolist aspiration than a metabolic necessity. Shrubberies cringed like melting cellophane at my approach, resuming their topiary propriety in my passing. Even the sound of my own voice, taunting me from across the road, was not enough to distract me from my happiness. Topiary propriety. Try saying that 3 times in a hurry. Nice one there, Steve. Lovely book. Get it if you can find it. I imagine it's floating in the ether at this point. I think it's fairly a few years, 1996, well, it's not that old. You might track it down. And good luck if you do. It's a wonderful little volume. The poetry of Alice Burdick, from which we have read several times on Poetry Show, although not recently. There's a new selected with a nice introduction by Alessandro Porco and a nifty afterword, sort of biographical in intent, by Alice herself. And, it's part of that rather good series, the Laurier Poetry series from Wilfrid Laurier University Press. There's about at least 25, 30 of them now. And they're great introductions to poets that you should know about. Although if you're following Poetry Show, you don't need to know much about Alice because we've already, made her famous. And a nice selection. Good introduction by Alessandro. And great afterword by Alice herself. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs of the afterword because it's pretty much a poem, prose poem itself. Language is a cradle. Words swaddle and make a home. People grow and words are rooms in the home we walk through and open up to others. They stack up and make shapes and fall or are knocked down repeatedly and then reform again. My first home was filled with language. It was audible in the voices of adults speaking, organizing, laughing, and fighting in our communal home. It was voiced on records that spun, in songs that were sung. It was also contained in lines on many pages, in books that lined shelves from the floor to the ceiling, in multiple tongues due to my multilingual father. It found its way into bookworks, batiks, and paintings that my mother made, sometimes in the form of languages I did not know. It installs itself into my brain, so I used it to talk to myself while drawing and writing. Yes? Let's do a couple of the poems here. Some of them are quite long, and not that there's anything wrong with long poems, but they take up a lot of time on Poetry Show. So let's go for kind of the medium length ones here. For Gary. Sometimes the motion of this time crosses each established line. It fixes light here, a bright and vivid light of every origin. I see you over these edges, a beautiful cloud, a blue jay's spot to land, My honey, I wish to see you, because my heart is open. I wish to hope the path be clear and lit, a dark and night-filled place, a home to feed your hands in. Your bike always was so sleek, a shining silver machine. Silver was your color, and you wore it a piece at a time. Stand near to me. The moment you were lowered into the earth, you put your heart right into mine. It was an echo and also a new biology. How did it come to this? What will happen now? Lightning shook the sky when I said your name. The sky is so bright, my eyes can't open. It hurts to look up. The world has layers of time and light. Optimistic that the birds will visit, the leaves all hurry down. The discreet man says, time emits items. To ask me to ask him what we do. You were a very fast man, the air around your bike broke in waves. This way you melted from one destination to the next. You moved so fast, you were gone before I got to you. Each day goes by with no record, with no time. Hold the air like water, a real own cover. Or the real's own cover. Oh, this next one's a beauty. Not that the last one wasn't good, but this one's even better. Red Eye. After a while, we are not human. In the air, feeling the air, being the stuff we breathe. Beyond this time, there is a place. The opening in a head, like my brother said, to another dimension. One eye can't see. All red and bumpy, coveted by security in the waiting room of the downtown hospital, one lady just screams and screams. Security still wants my autograph, since there's nothing really wrong with me. When it seems I see most clearly, that's when my sight is taken away. Conjunction of Venus with something on Thursday. Many planets move all the time. Conjunctivitis, but only for one eye. I can't see you, so why have eyes? Be a friend, show yourself. I sleep still on one side of the bed. I leave room for you, all of space for you. Time grew large and then compacted, an intense gathering of moments. Something so huge outside of bounds, outside normal time, becomes infinite. You can't see this season with me, with physical eyes. Gaze on this. The snow is soft and holds the street light at night. When I walk, I see a window show its light in a frame and on the white sidewalk. Light, dark, through it in steps. Breathe in the air, heat of blood. Lungs and saliva propel a big steam puff. That's how I feel the edge of the cold. The blue sky, then a cloud not feeling cold, but held in the watery sky. There are bottles sold in drugstores called Refresh Tears. Bottles of tears. I don't need a bottle, it all falls out. I would like to share them. You can line up and drink my tears. I won't charge you, free for the asking. You can taste how I feel. It is refreshing. When I cry, I am honest. It is the truth. My heart is sore. Tired of days, surviving, being the survivor, the one who lives. I cry because it's beautiful. Indeed it is. And the last one for today from this book. What to do with bad men? The ring is crying in the bungalow. There's a mystery unfounded on truth. Not to find the way out, never to know what the jam eaters know, that the words land in different places and mean one thing, dream notice. Bad men line us up for our final photograph. They want to remember us as we were. Talk upstairs, loud so you can't reach our ears. The sword is sure suspended, as is the swooping sound. They are shooting the globe, leaving pieces scattered for the weary maids. The way to deal with bad men is to get the feathers out of hiding and tickle their hidden softness. Yes, great poems from Alice Burdick. Deportment. How's your deportment? I try to keep mine, on the straight and narrow. You never know who's watching. That's besides the security services. Ottawa poet Christine McNair. Is this her first trade book? I think it is. It's called Charm, published by Book Thug, who I think is now Book Hug. I think the matter's rather fluid at the moment. But very postmodern, this stuff. Challenging to read, but precise in its choice of words. And that's what poetry's all about, isn't it? Precision. Precision. And there's one thing Christine is, it's precise. I was told this book won an award, but I'm darned if I can remember what award it was. It wasn't the Governor General's, was it? I don't know, some other award, but all awards are good for poets because it gets their name out. And don't forget this one, Christine McNair. And the book is Charm. I'm charmed. Advanced Mourning. I bury my mother more times than not. My lover, my ex-lover, my father, my cat, yanking them up and out of the ground, burbly red in their warning, in their spectrum, in the developing film canister or pixel. Pixels, I make my life a pixel. A lover? What's the word lover? I hate the word lover. I hate the name and its clumsy sweat. I stymie judgment. Progressive enclosures and debt requirements, the length of a kiss, dull issue, depth studies. Here's me in my neck of the woods, sunning myself against all odds across an acreage of concrete. Parts A and B from a sequential poem called Real. A smudge of red ochre cracked, leaf after leaf as big as my head. Yellows, reds, oranges, pinks, browns. Underfoot they murmur. I step on them to hear the crackle. Smoke pervades. Wood smoke, leaf smoke, barbecue smoke. The lights carry dried leaves in the shade. Pressed botanicals. I pick up leaves with my brother for the Thanksgiving table centerpiece. The smell of turkey and stuffing. Cranberry stains along my dress. B. My cousin Elizabeth in the woods behind the house, her hair to her hips, or I thought it was, brushing her hair, sitting on a rock. I hover worshipfully. She statues, mermaid, siren of the trees, long brown curls and long limbs. Her brothers and my brothers break up our forest hutch. I turn furious and swear at them, a world too old for my mouth. They gape, first sense of fiery, righteous indignation, sword weighted. That's my girl, sword weighted. Now here's one with a sort of unpleasant title, but listen to this. Pleurisy of the mouth and petty seizures. I hope that's long over. I forgot myself somewhere. We've lost all cadence. Dear beauty, forgive me my horrible, horrible failings, most particularly my hands and their inconsiderate lack, all the big, big fun they can't produce, how they implicate themselves. Forgive me the tracery latchings of my unhooked adolescence, dim scar tissue so entirely visible. I scar easily. I hope your skin is firmer stuff. How embarrassing I am. I ache for you already. Please forgive me. Preternatural ache, newt fleshy shoulder. Wee gurgle poems about babies. Should include alternate endings. All the potential wrapped up in a net. So that's pleurisy of the mouth and petty seizures. It sounds like a difficult birthing. And God bless you for surviving that, dear. Really. More from Charm another time, perhaps. Another newish book by Canadian Joshua Mensch, Because. It's one long poem divided up into parts, chapters or whatever. Interestingly enough, it's published by New York company W.W. Norton. Joshua Mensch is a poet, visual artist, and founding editor of the literary journal Body. He grew up in Nova Scotia and lives and works in Prague. Wow. Now, this is like an 80, 90 page poem confronting and grieving and looking for some kind of vengeance, I think, poetic vengeance, by a boy, well, a man, remembering being a boy, being abused by a camp counselor. And it's not pretty, but it's real. And I'd like to read a bit of it for you. Were it not for a cabin on Cape Breton Island with only mist to break the tree-lined horizon, were it not for the two of us, I was 12 and together we read Homer's Iliad, not the Odyssey, though mostly Don read aloud to me, his gorgeous voice, his bathrobe slipping off, his stiff, shiny shins, his legs like white radish stalks speckled with long, wiry hairs, while outside snow hugged the forest, and a deep fog rose around the top of the hills, the snow thick and wet, ideal for throwing, and every once in a while the deep silence would be interrupted by a crack like gunfire, or as another spruce snapped under its weight. Bark, shrapnel, and rolling sound ricocheting up the narrow valley, till it reached our meadow, an 8-sided cabin with a black stove that wrapped us in heat and made our knees itch, flame-pulsed logs lighting our limbs with nail-width lines of blood. 2. At night he read to me from the tracker, a chapter at a time, then tell stories about his childhood in Kansas, the endless fields and grinding oil wells, floods that washed away low-lying houses and poor people with them. His father, whom everyone loved but him, his fat mother, his unhappy sisters. He'd read to me and tell me about my parents, whom he knew at school in Toronto, about a woman named Carmen and the man she thought was the devil, about his wife, Lorna, and her head full of brains, about the small college in New Mexico where the fun ended when evil Dean Neerdorf blew a tumor and had everyone fired, and then sent poison pen letters after them. Dawn, Lorna, even my dad, anyone who wouldn't give him a blowjob. Three, he'd show me dirty movies to inspire me to try harder with my body, for it was truly impressive how a guy could shoot his wad that far. It didn't matter that I didn't have a wad yet, but sometimes a small pearl of clear lube appeared at the tip and he licked it off, because that was my accomplishment. And even though it wasn't ready yet, he was proud of me. I knew the names of animals, the silhouettes of birds, and the sounds an engine makes when climbing up a hill. I could tell what gear and how far away his truck was, and had memorized the avionic controls of the fighter jets that patrolled the coast. He showed me how to fashion a battery from a potato, how to flood an engine. I told him the speed of a bullet underwater, the speed of the Earth around the sun. He told me that floating in space in orbit was nothing more than endless falling. Yes, potent. A message normally conveyed in memoirs and articles. I haven't seen much poetry about it. And good for you, Joshua. Be brave. And of course, there's lots more. And he does resolve his issues. Although it sounds terribly practical for something as aesthetically radiant as poetry. The resolution really is in the writing, not in the unfolding of the plot. But with these longer narrative type poems, you tend to stray into story territory, into novel territory, where things tend to want to be resolved. Now, this is a new book, Jason Stephanik, Night Became Years, published by Coach House in Toronto. And this, since they've announced that they're not doing any more poetry books, I wonder if this is one of the last. Anyway, it's very good. And I will show you the cover so you can run right out and buy it. It's a fine book. And he combines his knowledge of, how shall I put it, 18th century literature. And there's interesting little quotes here and there. There's one, there's like 2 pages of footnotes, a bit like T.S. Eliot. Quotes from Thomas Dekker, Shakespeare, Jacob Boehme, Paracelsus, Thomas Rollins, Leonard Peltier. Well, no, he's not a mystic, is he? Convicted, perhaps unjustly, in the 1970s of murder at Pine Ridge Reservation. Well, we know that story. In fact, I think Robert Redford made a film about it, didn't he? Francois Villon, Stéphane Mallarmé. You know, there's great quotes in here, cleverly worked into poems that are not the least bit like the 18th century. Very modern, very Winnipeg, very urban. What else have we got? Matthew Arnold. The book Against Witches, Malleus Maleficarum. Many, many interesting quotes. And like I say, he works them in very cleverly. So I'm not even sure if he works them in so cleverly as I read it, you may not be able to catch them. But I'll do my best. as I always do. Potable. Canteens are costly. Gatorade bottles can be pulled from any bin. They never leak. If you bash them, they never stay misshapen. Dehydration means dead. Joint pain, overeating, swooning, lagging pep, lest your slumming desires these effects. A third of walkabouts, don't forget, should entail scrounging for potable water. Every house a hose. Espy, if you're forced until a bootleg to a tap clears. Hide in a trash barrel or the ribs of an upturned canoe. Once I lurked in a development for weeks, slaking thirst, gorging snow peas, pod and all. Wherever water pools provided your procured iodine pills, consider a source. Motor oil pans, discarded sports helmets, community swimming holes, or dips in eaves of roofs are known to hold a lick. If you type to scale, a fire escape for a snooze. You can always pinch some later from a fountain in a mall, but recall the medieval proverb, from when we owned much more than parched flesh. Don't dare toss dirty water until you find fresh. Excuse me for the little fumbles there, but the sun's starting to shine in my eyes. I'll shift position here. Maybe we've had cloudy weather for nigh on a month, and suddenly it's sunny, as you can see from the screen. Well, that's a little better. Outside Lanigan. This hulking grain silo feels reverent in a full moon. Our sanctum of steel beam, batten, corrugated iron that shifts with movements of wind off our candle flame. We had passed the town of Lanigan, following faded highway paint, wired but giddy with love, while distant farmhouse granges formed ahead like crumbled bookends. You, my love, suggested we follow fields left fallow, then led us waist deep through a tract of ripening mustard. But I was the one that kissed you at the Silver Maple and saw the pegboard cola sign pitched against the barn. And there, a derelict baler with orange moon above embellished one grain silo with rusted door ajar. What floor once was here has overgrown with thistle. Our candle whispers as we read Sir Philip Sidney. To the Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia, the chapter where fishermen find a shepherd washed up on the shore. As I watch you scissor one leg into your turquoise garter, so our imprint will remain tomorrow when we're gone. Like that one. Let me see if I can. I think 17. See if I can get one of the quotes a little more accurately. Fire song. Hosanna, as love has never uncomplicated itself, your memories never escape their spell of why they recount. You can't disavow you more destroyed than built things. He-Men, model tanks, Barbies you set on sawhorses to film while shooting with high-powered pellets. Hosanna, you won't disown your scissored each letter of Thomas Decker's May song, spun them in a hat with each letter of your lover's name, to paste that one long barbarous word on a stone church wall, as love has never uncomplicated itself. Hosanna, as love has never uncomplicated itself in your heart. So you fight like a badger on a barbed leash, the state that keeps you yanking, twisting on the chain, rankling by instinct stung, whether it's a curse to think love is foolish. Archived. VHS dubbed from my summer tweens. I untrunk after years pent to the plunk of my 30th at the Golden Rim Motor Inn. That vid I clunk in the slit, stick the empty play button with ballpoint pen, finger fast forward to the final climax of Jason and the Argonauts. Just as the Colchian king, Ites, from the handfuls of Hydra's teeth out his helmet, evokes 6 ranks of skeletons. They thrust up from sun-baked fields with jawbones shrieking wind. And as a spear rings off a shield and media slumps, dead for the moment, the screen hisses, morphs as rainbow-colored bars to Captain Barney Miller. Brown brogues braced on his oak desk, munching on a meatloaf sandwich. Barney dishes, "Be polite, kid," to Stanley Wojciechowicz, while at the end of the set, Fish wrangles on the phone with his wife. The audience claps, a bass spring collage of credits pass. Plastic wheels squeal, and after a lull of dull white noise, I get to it. The slow-mo epic recording of my dungeon crawling 99 ill-lit levels of Tengen's Gauntlet. The 8-bit masterpiece I caught with patch cords, output cables and a VCR, half pancaked by a wrestling move, in my bedroom back in grade 7. In my last cromlech, at my peak, slaying Marak and the green dragon for the sacred orb. Without as rewarding a quest completed ever since. Yes, I've got my VHS archives, Jason. Things I thought would be lost forever back in the days when we didn't know that everything would appear somewhere. Even horrible old TV shows from 50 years ago. Yeah, I've got a few of those. And memories, you know. Bonnie Raitt at the Winnipeg Folk Festival 30 years ago. Introducing a song by saying, "This is a one that'll zip up all those tents." Gavin Bryars at the Glen Gould Centre. Different things that we thought we should tape because they were going to be lost forever. In fact, the Gavin Bryar ones has. I don't know. CBC's never played it that I know of. Anyway, I'm never going to replay this either. But that's all to the well because YouTube's going to have it forever. And thus, poetry will continue on. Great poetry, good poetry, fine poetry. Language unfurling itself into mazes of vines growing up the edges of all culture. Describing it, not describing it, turning it away from it, ignoring it, leading only to other language. Language that describes things, language that doesn't. Rhythm like molecular bonding, mysterious. What was that Jim Morrison said about there is love in molecular structure? That's one of his little chants in the long version of Who Do You Love on the Doors in concert. There is love in molecular structure. And by God, he was right. Farewell to you all. See you in 2019.